Hi there, and welcome to the Catholic Education Playbook Show, where we talk about faith, culture, and all things Catholic education. If you are interested in bringing a sense of order back to the culture by strengthening families, schools, and churches, you have come to the right place. My name is Kimberly Begg. I am one of your hosts. I am the editor of Catholic School Playbook, which is a project of the Ortner Family Foundation. And I am joined by my wonderful co host, Shawn Peterson. Shawn is the president of Catholic Education Partners, which is the Catholic voice for education choice. We have a fantastic show for you today. We are delighted to be joined by Elias Moo. Elias is the superintendent of Catholic schools of the Denver Archdiocese, and very soon he is transitioning to a new, very exciting challenge. He will be joining the Diocese of Portland and will be the director of Catholic education there. We are delighted to have Elias with us. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly, for having me.
Welcome, my friend. Glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Shawn.
Well, Elias, I thought that we would kick off hearkening back to a wonderful presentation that I saw you give to a group of teachers in Denver. What I loved about this presentation, you discussed some just, wonderful topics of formation and of pedagogy and of, teaching the whole child and in human formation. But what I loved about this is you kicked off that conversation with this really interesting question. And what you asked the teachers was, imagine if a stranger comes to our school and sees, that there is no sacred art on the wall and sees that the crucifixes are not there and our kids are not going to mass. You asked this group, what would they see that would let them know that this school, this Catholic school, is different than the non-Catholic school that is across the street? So I want to ask you, why did you start the presentation off with that question? And what answer are you hoping that the teachers and the principal and the families and the students at the schools would be able to answer about what makes a Catholic school different, even without the sacred art and the crucifixes and mass?
Yeah, it's my favorite thought exercise, actually, to engage our school leaders and teachers in, only because, quite frankly, I think one of the things that has befallen Catholic education today, in the modern context, is that oftentimes we have also bought into really broken notions of the aim and outcome of education, or what makes education worthwhile is how useful it is for the student receiving the education. So again, a very obsessive, utilitarian-oriented view of education. And and again, sadly, I think in my experience, I've found, and this really coming from a lot of analysis, personal analysis, self-reflection, and prayer on the mission and purpose of Catholic education. I went to a school of education. I'm a graduate of a school of education at the University of Notre Dame. I was immersed in the best of modern education and modern educational methods and techniques and pedagogy. And it was as a young teacher that I really began to grapple with questions around. But so if high school entrance or college entrance, or a great career is the highest aim, right? Is that all there is? Is that it? That's so I'm a product of Catholic education. My parents are immigrants from Mexico, and they felt that the best thing they could give, the best inheritance they could give me and my four siblings, was a Catholic education. And but as a student, I grew up with the sense that the reason why they were sacrificing many things, or investing in our education in the way that they were, right, versus sending us to a free public school, was merely because the Catholic school produced better outcomes, or the Catholic school gave students greater opportunities, and they merely just wanted greater progress, social progress, for us to be able to receive something that they themselves were not, and were not able to receive. And so, where did this come from? Well, again, and it's not to be disparaging of the teachers or the school leaders that I had as a student from kindergarten through 12th grade. But as the son of a migrant farm worker, of immigrants, the message that was instilled in me and in many of my classmates who were also who also came from similar circumstances and situations was, you have to be better than your parents. And maybe that message wasn't said directly, but it was in what was focused on in the classroom. It was in the messages that were given to students, that the obsession with college career readiness that I experienced as a student. And then the subtle ways that this was communicated to me, right? That and in fact, I can tell you, quite frankly, there was a conversation with a teacher who said, "My hope for you is that you will actually be a better person than your dad. That you would have greater opportunities than your dad and be a better person than your dad." But gosh, there's something so that was now, as I look back on it, right? Something so broken about even that notion. Because quite frankly, my dad is one of the best people that I know. And if I could ever be half the man that he is, right, it would be a very, very good thing. But it was actually in a conversation with my dad when I started as a principal, where I asked him, for whatever reason, curiosity finally hit me, and I asked him, "Hey, Dad, why all the sacrifice? Why all the things that you did? Right, the many extra shifts, and we grew up with very little. We had everything we needed, but not a lot in terms of material things." And I was blown away by his answer. Again, I was expecting to hear, "I just wanted you to have greater opportunities in this country and have a better career than me," and so on and so forth, right? And his answer was really simple. This migrant farm worker, right, with a high school level education at the best, said, "The reason why your mom and I did that was because we felt that the greatest inheritance we can give you was an education that led you to be free to come to know, love, and serve God and discover your unique vocation and mission in this world." He's like, "I could care less if actually what your career is. You could have ended up working in the fields with me. But if you were a more virtuous man, a better man than I was, then I would have taken that as a successful marker of your education."
How wonderful. And so are you saying that it was your dad who presented this idea to you for the first time, that this is not a message you were hearing in your education classes in
Yeah,
college?
yeah, no, it was really mind blowing, and actually, I think it came in a very providential moment. So at the time, I had also, again, just through my own desire to pursue this question. So the school where I served in Denver, St. Rose of Lima Catholic Academy, was a school that served primarily Hispanic immigrant families and students. 98% free and reduced lunch qualifying. Majority of the families were Spanish speaking. So in so many ways, right, they felt like I was looking in a mirror to my own situation and background growing up, um, and and it was actually a conversation with my pastor, um, Father Nick Thompson, at the time, where we were really grappling with what is the highest good, the greatest good, the highest aim that we have for our students. Father, it's got to be more than just, again, material success, or really great test scores, or closing the achievement gap, right? As important as those things are, certainly, right? Intellectual pursuits and the intellectual formation is critical to a good school. But I think what we were surfacing then, and we didn't have the language at the time, was it felt like there was a divorce, or that the two existed in parallel realms, and weren't fully integrated, right? And so, that searching really started with conversations with my pastor, thanks be to God, and led me then through my own graduate studies, as well in leadership, to discover incredible encyclicals. Stratford Caldecott's Beauty in the Word was a real source of inspiration and intellectual conversion as well for me. Divini Illuius Magistri, written by Pope Pius XI in 1929, what I would argue is the Magna Carta that lays out the charter for Catholic education, the Church's charter for Catholic education, so beautifully, and prophetically as well. So it's going to the heart of the church, and then hearing, again, my dad relay this. There was a chance encounter with a former student I kid you not, in that same year, who came back, and he had not graduated from high school. He was a dropout. He ended up getting his GRE, or GED, excuse me. And we were talking, and he said, I've actually been hesitant to come to talk to you because you always harped on college as the marker of success, and I didn't get to college. And so, even in that moment of just realization, like, my goodness, what have I bought into? What have I done? And how have I contributed to this broken sense of the telos, right? The Greek word for the orientation, the aim, of the pursuit of education and formation. So, just to give you a little bit, of my own conversion, because I think that just to bring it full circle to your question, is why one of my desires as a leader in this role as superintendent, and certainly as I started as director of Catholic education, is to challenge the notions that we have bought into naturally because of just us being products of our own education, us being those of us working in schools, right? We're products of modern education by and large. Notwithstanding, right, those that perhaps are coming from great programs that I think have reclaimed the proper notion of education and formation of the human person. But the overwhelming majority of us are coming from these schools of education. And I'm convicted that we have been robbed, especially in the Catholic educational landscape. We have been robbed of the beautiful, timeless charter and tradition that we have, one that I think is best for the human person, best for the world, comes directly from the heart of the church. It's not a model to be implemented, but again, it's the church herself saying this is what is most appropriate for the formation and education of the human person. And so I think that getting to our teachers and to our leaders and helping them to begin to reflect on, right, what is my worldview ultimately? Because as I like to tell teachers and our school leaders, every method has an underlying philosophy. There is no, in my view, there is no philosophy neutral or no neutral method, because there's something underlying. And unfortunately, so much of modern education has become about technical skill, right, and ability. But we don't know the influence of the progressive constructivists and the Columbia School of Education and John Dewey, or the Frankfurt School, which introduced cultural Marxism into modern education, right? And that these are the nefarious influences that have crept into modern education and have resulted in, right, and can also be tracked back to the Enlightenment period. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Pestalozzi, a Swiss educator who was the first to begin to coin this term of student-centered education. So we don't have a sense of what has transpired and has led to the moment that we're in. And again, my dad, to come back to the wisdom of an ancient thinker, and my dad, he often would tell me and my siblings, if you don't know where you've come from, you can't know where you need to go. And so there's so much that we have, I think, for the we being those of us that have been brought up in whether as students in modern education or have studied modern education in preparation for professional careers in education. There's so much, again, that I think that is not given and passed on in what should be a rich formative experience in preparation for a higher intellectual pursuit. And so if a simple exercise of just presenting, right, hey, what is beyond what we can see, is not the task of Catholic education to awaken the sacramental imagination. And so if that sacramental imagination is not present in leaders and in teachers, then it's certainly not going to be handed on to students. And I think that so many of the teachers and leaders that we have in our Catholic schools actually desire something more, but perhaps have been shackled to, again, modern education standards and a worldview that's so fragmented, it of no fault of their own, I think, right? We have all kind of bought into the latest fads and trends in modern education, but there's something deeper and something richer that I think the church proposes. And I think a question like the one you're referring to here, Kimberly, is meant to begin to trigger a self-reflection and a self-analysis around how do I see the world? personally first as a teacher, and then how am I helping students to see the world? And is there something fundamentally different about how we view the world as Catholics that actually can be imparted to students? And so I think that gets to the second question that you asked, right? What would I hope to hear as an answer to that? Yeah, well, my hope would be this, right? I usually pose it as a thought exercise. If it's a smaller group, I'll ask, hey, can you share with me some of the things? And here's some of the things that we hear, right? Which, in one sense is not surprising, but in the other, I think is indicative of the situation that we're in. But we'll hear things like, well, respect in the hallways and in the classroom, right? Kids wear uniforms. We have discipline. We have order. And I'm quick to tell them, no, yeah, great. I mean, oftentimes I think those are the things that we associate with good Catholic education. But arguably, there's charter schools that have mastered the art of student classroom management and discipline. There's charter schools and public schools that use uniforms now. There's charter schools that have these, humanist values of kindness and respect tapered all over the wall, right? So if that's not the defining feature, then what is? And this is, I think, where we get into some really good grappling. At least that's my hope. And so I'd like to present then a second thought exercise as a follow-up. I'm a former middle school math teacher, so I love to engage them in math because that's the least expected discipline to talk about Catholic mission. Usually, Catholic mission, we associate that with catechesis or theology classes, right? Again, a product of a fragmented Catholic educational experience. But it's in the math class, right? Okay, imagine you have students, you're discussing the Fibonacci sequence, right? The sequence that has perplexed and at the same time captivated the imagination of so many. It's this pattern that you can see that I won't get into the technicalities of it here for you, but a pattern that you see present in so many things. And in so many ways in creation, logarithmic sequences that can explain the creation and development of spiral galaxies, or the petals on a flower, or even the spiral of a hurricane. So what's a student naturally going to do in a math class, right? Or let's take a science class. You could arguably have a science class that has all the same kind of raw stuff in a Catholic school and a public school, same microscopes, perhaps even, God forbid, but the way that we know things go, even the same textbooks, right? And they're studying cells and looking at a cell under the microscope. But what happens next is where I think the task of Catholic education happens. The student's going to ask, why is this the way that it is? Why do these patterns exist this way? Why does this cell exist this way? And in a secular public environment, the best that they're going to be able to hear, right, is what? Well, it's a cool cosmic coincidence. It just is, right? Or go ask your parents. Your parents can explain that to you, right? My hope would be in a Catholic school, as I tell our leaders and teachers, that actually a teacher would lead that child or that student outside of themselves to begin to awaken the sacramental imagination to see in the logic and order of creation, in the math patterns, in the mathematical concepts and constants, and in the composition of a cell, the imprint of a God who loves them and is using creation to woo them to himself, to engage them in a relationship of love. We can do that. We should do that. That's what as I propose to them, is the church's vision for what we have to offer in our schools. But if it just stays at, well, let's just memorize math facts, or if it just stays at, just memorize the parts of a cell so you can get an A on the test, then we have fallen so short. And is that not the task? I mean, the root of the word education, right? Educare, to lead out. Is it not to lead out with right pedagogy? In fact, just recently, I was reminding some teachers of the roots of the word pedagogy. I'm not even going to begin to try to tell you what the Greek, how to pronounce it in Greek, but the Greek root actually leads you to a definition of pedagogy as a slave who takes the master's children to school. And as I was telling them, so if our task in education is to lead the student out of themselves, then are we not slaves of a master, right? We're not servants of a master leading his children back to him, right? To encounter the logos, Jesus Christ, the principle, defining principle and reason for all things, so that in the logos they can know the heart of the Father for them, and in the heart of the Father discover their mission and vocation in this world. That's what I think we have to reclaim, and to do that we have to engage deeply and challenge these notions. So yeah, I can go on even longer on this, but I'll stop there because I think I gave you plenty.
It's really a shame you don't have more passion and fire for this job. I mean, really wish if you could find that, that'd be great, Elias. No, it was fun. My question to you was going to be, I was going to ask you about the biggest threat internally and externally to Catholic education, but I think you've really actually already answered that question, both of those questions, because I think you've answered, like, it's a secular trying to, well, in a way, the secular infiltrating, but we've really opened the door. We've invited the thief into the house. They didn't break in. We actually invited them in, I think, and basically said, take what you will. And so I think and then that becomes the internal threat as well, right? And then we're sending out our teachers, we're sending out already in a lot of ways poorly catechized people. We're sending them to mostly public universities and institutions. And then we're hoping somehow that 4 years later, they come out more Catholic than they went in, so that they can then, influence young minds. So it's like, gee, what could possibly go wrong with that scenario, right? So I think you've so what I do want to get more into, and you and I've had a lot of these conversations, and you touched on a little bit, how do we get away from, I love that you're taking the title of, Director of Catholic Education. Sometimes titles have been switched to, Director of Catholic Mission, or Head of Schools. I love that we're getting away from the secular title of Superintendent, which really, it does sound like some awful, the Prussian factory model of, here's, it's your superintendent, he will watch you for the day. I mean, we've gotten into this crazy. So I love that you're doing that. So can you talk a little bit, Elias, about, what should we do about accreditation? What should we do about teacher licensure? How do we break away, from that secular stamp of approval, and still give the bishops confidence and give our parents confidence that our schools good. But ultimately, the bishop or the archbishop, in both cases, he should really be the one accrediting his schools. I mean, he should be doing that. And I get we have to have measures and all this kind of thing, but can you talk a little bit about that? Like I said, we've had these conversations. What are your thoughts on that? How do we do that in a way that, we can still present ourselves to parents and the public, but to really reclaim the role of the bishop who started the Catholic schools in the first place? The bishops did. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and quite a few, actually. Here I'm led to actually something that was repeated in then the Congregation for Catholic Education, but now the Dicastery for Culture and Education, in January of 2022, released an instruction on the identity of the Catholic school for a culture of dialogue. And those that are familiar with Vatican documents will know that they're not necessarily the easiest reads. They're pretty dense, but this is probably actually one of I have found to be one of the most comprehensive and clear documents that we have on the mission of the Catholic school and what's proper and must be true, especially about, again, the role of the local ordinary or the bishop in the life and mission of the Catholic school. So quoting St. John Paul II, the document notes that the bishop is the father of the church in its entirety in his local territory. And I can tell you right now, just from my experience these last 6 years, serving alongside a really great bishop, Archbishop Aquila, who truly believes in his role as the father of his church, and on the verge of working for another really great bishop in Archbishop Sample as well, who embraces that so deeply. I can tell you that I think, and also in talking to my colleagues, that one of the wounds that I think has been inflicted on Catholic schools has been the abdication of the spiritual fathers of our church. And sometimes that has been, and I've said this to bishops before, of their own doing, whether because they're so consumed by, again, the daunting task that it is to be a bishop in the modern world, and especially a bishop in the U.S. And of modern U.S. dioceses, right? It's an impossible human job. From a human perspective, it's impossible. But given that reality, right, I think that oftentimes they've tried to really trust in the leaders around them, and oftentimes that has been to help manage the issues, to help manage the challenges that are present. And so in some ways, right, that has led to an abdication of their fatherhood there. Or in another way, in another form, it's manifested in a professional education class that has said, hey, bishop, or even to parish priests, right? Father, you're not an educator. Let the professionals do the work of education. You stay over here, come celebrate the sacraments for us. We love when you do that, Father. And actually, you don't have to do it every day, maybe not even every week, right? Once a month is sufficient. So like we have also, the professional education class has done such a good job of sidelining our bishops and sidelining our pastors as well. And because of that, I think, again, what we have seen is a wound of abandonment that has manifested in the church. And so what we need is we need our pastors, starting with our bishops, to again claim their rightful place, their role, their responsibility in the life of the school, and in the educational apostolates of their diocese, and our parish priests as well, to be able to own that work too, of being the spiritual fathers of their communities. And part of that spiritual fatherhood is to protect and to safeguard the mission of the school. And there's other ways that I think, practically speaking, that can happen. So, what we have seen then, taking stock of that, and to assist Archbishop Aquila in Denver, and something I've been discussing with Archbishop Sample now as we look towards Portland. But in light of this instruction, what are the systems and structures we can put around the bishop to empower him in his role, and to give him the right structures that he needs to be able to exercise his canonical rights and duties on behalf of the church to all the schools, all the Catholic schools in the territory. That's what the instruction says, not just the parochial schools or those that are covered by the diocese, but even schools that belong to institutes of apostolic life or consecrated life, right? The bishop has a duty to all of those, and primarily it is to safeguard the deposit of faith. It's to ensure that what's happening in the school is consistent with the church's teaching and charter. So for us, it was clear that the instruction was very clear in saying we need a visitation process. We need the bishops to engage in a visitation process. And for all extended purposes, what they were describing there was what we would call more conventionally an accreditation process. Mm-hmm. I think modern accreditation is actually incredibly broken, and incredibly non-aspirational. That's part of the reason why it's broken. It's become this kind of minimum standard, pat on the back process that really has become actually quite a business, especially in the U.S., right? And I can tell you from our experience in Denver, the creditor that we had for 2 decades, right? The thousands of dollars that we're paying for really a process that was not meaningful to begin with. And then 2, that was just secular standards, modern education standards, that then we had to throw some type of Catholic standards on top of, right? merely making it a veneer ultimately, was not a good use of resources either. And our schools, our school leaders, and our pastors resented the Archdiocese for making them go through this secular accreditation process. Again, they go back to an earlier notion, right? There is no neutral method or philosophy neutral method. Every method and system has an underlying philosophy. And so accreditation, I think, has been one of those, and I think we could add state licensure to that as well, right? One of those unquestioned systems and structures that we have bought into in our Catholic schools, without really understanding what are we actually promoting here or buying into. What vision of the world or of education are we buying into when we shell out, $45,000, $50,000 sometimes a year for this accreditation to happen at a diocesan level? And so if the church is calling for this visitation process to essentially assess the fidelity of a school in all aspects, right? Not just, again, in doctrinal matters, which oftentimes just gets reduced to, do you have good theology teachers, and is your theology program at least marginally competent, right? But in every aspect and dimension of the curriculum, in every aspect of the systems and structures of the school enterprise, in how you engage families, right? In leadership structures, seeing that there's, I would say this, and some might disagree with me, but I don't think there exists an organization or an entity today that can accomplish this for bishops, to be able to provide a true assessment experience that will allow the bishop to really own his duty and responsibility, and then be able to properly accompany a school. In what way, right? Not to tolerate the ways in which it's not meeting mission, but actually accompaniment that leads to what? To conversion, to renewal, to be able to call his pastors and his leaders to tend to what needs to be tended to, so that the mission can continue to be renewed in the most important things. So in Denver, we embarked on creating that. Seeing that there was nothing there, I think we engaged with various partners, mission partners that we have to assist us in developing, a set of standards that were reflective of the church's charter and tradition, rooted again in sound doctrine, but also in the church's own documents on education. And also calling for what I think the church calls for, which is for us to embrace, especially in the times that we're in, a Catholic educational program that is truly a liberal education experience, that is an education that leads to freedom in Jesus Christ, and that there's practical applications of that, right, in teaching and learning and curriculum and pedagogy and school culture and so on and so forth. And systems and structures, policies, et cetera. So this November, we actually launched that with and are launching this fall with 3 schools here in Denver. We just wrapped up the first visitation. We actually are a few days away from the second one. And it's been a really rich experience, really thorough. And the Archbishop appointing a team of experts, as the document calls for, to come in, visit the school. And the schools are asked to provide, what is your educational philosophy? Give us your reading list. What are all the things that kids are reading? There's interviews with all faculty, with parents, with students, and primarily the questions are really meant to gain information around what is their worldview? How do they see the task of education? How do they see their vocation and ministry as educators in relation to students? What is the highest good that the school has to offer? And it's been, I think, really illuminating and enlightening. But for what purpose? Some people, I think, have accused the diocese with this of just a ploy to come down with a booming hammer on top of schools, right? Or to want to remove the Catholic status and identity of a school. And that's not at all the case, I can tell you. In fact, Archbishop Aquila does not desire that at all. In fact, I think his deepest desire is for him, one, as the father of the local church, to be able to understand what's happening in the school. And then 2, to be able to weigh in and say, this is the beautiful work that's happening, but actually this is where, as the father of the local church and the successor of the apostles, I'm asking for this to be tended to. So then that will lead, right, the Catholic schools team to engage the leadership in the right conversation, which is, hey, here's what the bishop is asking for. Here's the commendations on the good that's happening. And let's talk, how can we support you in formation of your leaders and your teachers so that this can be accomplished? And then again, what do you have? You have the right type of accompaniment, ultimately. Because accreditation, I think, good accreditation or assessment has to lead to right formation too, which is another aspect of accreditation systems and processes today that's lacking. At best, you're going to get all this, laundry list of recommendations that tell you all these tactical things: do this, do that, do this, do that, and that's it. And we'll see you in 5 years, right? And your $50,000 is due next month. So the hope is to create something, again, aspirational, something that calls to the greater things. But that, to me, is actually what I believe deeply. If our bishops and dioceses could really embrace the bishop's role of being the father of his local church, it would be a game changer for our Catholic schools. Because then the trickle down is to pastors. If they see in their father the model of fatherhood, a spiritual fatherhood, over the institutions that the church has, then I think you start to see priests who also are like, as a delegate of my bishop too, right? Then it's my task to safeguard and protect this mission, and to ensure that it's happening, and not just, again, allow my value to be worth or be placed on how inactive I am, or how less of an obstacle, excuse me, I am to the school sometimes. And so then, I think we can add the state licensure piece in there too, because frankly, that's another area where, unquestioned assumption, marker of quality, state licensed teachers, right? That's been this notion that we've had present in schools now for decades. But at what expense? Well, we know, again, you just have to look up the state standards for teacher licensure of any state to see what do they believe is most important for teacher formation development, or I would call it maybe teacher deformation. So for us, it became really clear, if we're aspiring to more and to the church's heart and vision, then a teacher licensure is not going to cut it. And so, we're grateful, for example, for the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education and their willingness to work with us in partnering to develop a teacher formation program that we actually think would bring the right type of formation for educators in a Catholic school. And yeah, will result in a credential that then, at least, here in the Archdiocese of Denver and the number of other dioceses now, more and more, is being recognized as a credential to be eligible to be employed. Yep. But if we can remove ourselves from the yoke, this unnecessary yoke that we placed of, we will only hire teachers that are licensed by the state. We can broaden, I think, even the pool of eligible people, mission-aligned people that we can bring to work in our schools. So even just from that very functional perspective too, right? We could also expand the base and the talent that we have available to us. But fundamentally, again, it has to be more about elevating the primacy of formation versus just having a paper that says, great, you paid your $100 fee or whatever, right, to get your license. You took this test and it says that you can be a teacher. Is that not a low bar? I mean, how low of a bar is that? And I know that there's some states, Shawn, we've discussed this. There's some states that do require state licensed teachers to be even in private schools and in Catholic schools. And I have to believe that even in those situations, there could be some legislative options to pursue to find relief from that. But I, thanks be to God, in Colorado and also in Oregon, there's no state law that mandates that private schools, the Catholic schools, have to hire teacher licenses. And we finally realized that it's okay. It's not going to be scary, actually, to get rid of this self-imposed requirement of state licensed teachers. It has actually also helped our leaders to expand their notions of what quality is, and and be open to again something more than perhaps even what they had an understanding of.
Yeah, no, that's great. Amen, brother. I mean, yeah, I mean, Albert Einstein probably couldn't teach physics in most public high schools because he wouldn't be qualified. So, yeah.
Yeah, what great insights. I'm so glad that you mentioned the sidelining of our bishops and pastors. I've actually heard at least one pastor cite subsidiarity as a reason not to be involved with a parish school. It strikes me, though, that there is another really important group that has also been sidelined by professional educators, those who make claims that they're in a better position to educate children, and those would be parents. So actually, once I was in a second grade classroom when I heard a teacher say that very thing. Don't worry about if you don't have the answers at home. You are not the teacher. I am the teacher. So understand that this is my job and that is not your job. So understand that this relationship works if all the questions come to me as the teacher. And if you have your roles at home as the parent, could you speak a little bit to the sidelining of parents? Um, I think that this has been a problem for a long time in our society. I think this is a problem going back decades with parents thinking, well, I'm sending my kids off to school. They're getting the education there. Whatever we do at home, it is our home life. But I think that, there's been an awakening of parents as an understanding that they are, in fact, the primary educators of our children. This is a teaching of the Catholic Church. But I've also noticed more teachers embracing this really, really important truth that, yes, they are assisting. They're actually secondary educators of the children that are entrusted to their care. Would you speak a little bit to any shifts that you've seen in parental attitudes and maybe how you worked in Denver to bring parents along, and also maybe to also bring teachers along in this understanding of the church's teaching that parents are primary educators?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, as as the parent of school age children, I can tell you this is also incredibly important for my wife and I, as we look at and discern, continue to discern, right? What is it that we want to be able to see as parents in the education of our boys, and that truly is right a rightly ordered understanding of the primacy of parents as first educators, and the domestic church, the family, as the first school of the child. And then if that's the foundation, that we see the school, that leaders and teachers see their task, certainly as partners. But I would even say that again, subsidiary to the family, ultimately. So all things being equal, right? The foundation is what? It's church teaching. And I think that sometimes, I believe it or not, I've found that we use parents are the primary educators, so whatever they want is what's going to happen as well. That I think is actually taking it to another extreme that also falls short of the church's vision and understanding of even the primacy of the parent, because again, the foundation is what? It's truth. And so a school has to be committed to families by calling them to the church's understanding of the family, as the domestic church, and that the responsibility of the parents, right, then in that domestic church is as the leaders of their family to provide this formation for the children in wisdom and virtue. And so, thanks be to God, I think you're right, Kimberly. I think we have begun to see a reawakening of the primacy, the sense of an understanding of the primacy of parents, and oftentimes I think it actually has been because they're recognizing where modern education has gone with this question, which actually, in talking to some families, there, you all you have to do is turn on the TV and you'll see, right, the battles that families are locked into with local school districts, right, and school boards. That's, I think, where we see fundamentally the brokenness that has manifested in modern ed, especially in public education. But many families who are astonished to see, we can't believe the school board is pushing families out or not letting them have a say, or the families have to fight so hard to be able to have a say in their curriculum. And very charitably, what I like to say is, but this has always been the working understanding of public education. In fact, from the development of the common school under Horace Mann in the late 19th century, right, there was this sense of in loco parentis, that the school was meant to be a parent for the students if their parents weren't giving their children what the state believed was necessary for the sake of a good democracy, right? It's a really dangerous notion that I think we see playing out to its fullest extent now. And so, so they're going to have no qualms, I think, in a public setting to say, yeah, we know better than you, mom and dad, right? And in kind of the day and age that we're in, where so many ideologies contrary to the nature and understanding of the nature of the human person and sexual identity, and so on and so forth, right, have become commonplace and have found home in residence in public schools. We see this like nefarious mindset in place, right? For the sake of a tolerant and for the sake of an anti-racist society, right, we have to give kids what their parents don't want to give them. So obviously that's what's playing out. We see in public schools. But frankly, I think the Catholic school is not immune to some of this at times, right? Whether it's because it is driven by this really consumer minded kind of culture that's been embraced, right? Where, again, the customer's always right. Parents pay tuition, so whatever they want is what we're going to do. Oftentimes, I have found that has actually led to a diluting of the mission of this school, not a strengthening. But even in situations where again, parents are demanding certain things, right? I think fundamentally there's something good there, and that's that the parents recognize and see their role. But again, this is, I think, where schools have to go back to the church and to the church's understanding of the primacy of the parents and the family as the first school, and the foundations, right? Again, in faith, in virtue, in truth, and so. In kind of the right manifestation of this, right? I think, what do we see? And I see this present in many of our schools here in the Archdiocese of Denver. But it's leadership that believes that deeply and is inviting parents into the work and task of educating and informing their children. And in some cases, quite frankly, it's the school also engaging in the first proclamation, yes, of the gospel in some instances, but also the first proclamation to parents of, hey, mom, dad, you are the primary educators, and this is what the church means by that. And here's how we're going to invite you into this. And here's what we're going to ask you to do. We're going to ask you to live an active faith life at home. We're going to challenge you to go to mass together as a family. We're going to challenge you to pray together. We're going to create a space of Christian community where that can happen here. We're going to be unabashed about the gospel here and about the church's teaching. That's what we have to offer. So there's something beautiful, I think, about being so upfront and so clear with families about that, because then that allows the family to be able to know how to engage and where to engage. But also, I think it brings a necessary point of discernment for the family. So I've always been a believer that we have to take this to its the greatest extent possible, this understanding of the primacy of the parent. And we can't do that if in charity we're not clear and upfront with the family about what's expected by the church, from the church, of them, and also of their primary role in the life of the school. The principal at the school where my boys go to, I think, is a great example of this. He'll sit down with every prospective family, and before they even fill out any paperwork, he says, "Listen, I don't want you to go to the trouble of filling out paperwork to enroll your child here. until you hear from me what we believe as a church, what we believe as a school, what our worldview is, and what we're going to ask of you, mom and dad, as primary educators and of your domestic church. And he goes through, he gives them the charisma. He proclaims, it gives them a really simple proclamation of the gospel. He talks about the primacy and role of parents, what the church teaches, quotes the catechism. And then after that's all said and done, he says, listen, if you, mom and dad, are willing to commit, we're willing to commit to you that we're going to empower you as primary educators. And here are the ways we're going to do that. And if in good faith, you think you can be a part of this, we want you here. And if not, that's okay too. And there will be no hard feelings. And there's probably another school that will be a better fit for you. There's just something incredibly refreshing. Yeah, have some families walked away because of that? Absolutely. But, based on what I've heard and seen, more families often than not are challenged just enough to say, wow, there's something here that we want that maybe we don't have, or this aligns perfectly with our understanding too of the mission of our family and of me as a mother and as a father. And now I have a school that will support that. But yeah, too often I think we have also, I think in our Catholic schools at times viewed parents as adversaries. And we give lip service to the primacy of the parents, or lip service to the domestic church, right? The family as the first school. It's really easy to regurgitate that line, the company line, the church's company line there, without concrete, I think, living out of that belief. And so clarity, schools engaging families appropriately. For example, I think one of the arenas where we have challenged our schools here in Denver to really elevate the primacy of parents is in the space of sexual education. And fundamentally, I think we have tried to move so far away from removing the parent, or not allowing the parent to have the first entry point in that discussion and conversation. There are some things that a school should not engage in, even the Catholic school.
Do you help parents though with some of those discussions? I've heard school leaders say that the admissions process is actually that first step in educating a parent about how to be a primary educator, because a lot of parents are very accustomed to just delegating education tasks to a school. But, in what ways should a school proactively help parents in their vocation as parents?
Yeah. No, yeah. Admissions process is one of the first ones. I think engaging actually in formation, intellectual and spiritual formation of parents and families. At the school I was at, when I was a principal here in Denver, we started monthly gatherings that we called the Family Academy of Discipleship. And families that were going through sacramental prep were asked to be there, but it was an open invite as well to other families. And we really try to model that off of the image of the primitive church, the early church that we see in Acts of the Apostles, right? Gathering for teaching, for prayer, for breaking of the bread, for celebration of the Eucharist. And it was beautiful. We tried to make it as simple as possible. But for some parents, this became the first time that they actually ever engaged in a discussion on the faith with their children, or prayer with their children. And then you throw in some language differences there, where parents maybe were primarily English speakers, but their kids who would hear Spanish at home, but were going to school and receiving English instruction, to be able to actually have them enter into a space where they're having conversations, legitimate conversations on the faith. It's an example. There's other ways that I think schools have chosen to do that. They have book clubs or book studies for parents, right? Or moms groups. One of our diocesan schools has a dad's formation group that meets as well. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right in pointing out that schools have to be active in engaging in formative opportunities for families, and being invitational with it too, I think. But systems and structures can cultivate this, right? Even, for example, a policy that says if parents want to sit in a classroom, they're welcome. They're always welcome to sit in the classroom. We have nothing to hide. We shouldn't have anything to hide. But I have seen some reticence to something like that as well, right? Where it's like, well, we can't have parents in here because then, no, again, we have nothing to hide. And if a parent wants to be in there, what a great opportunity then for their child to see their parents in in the school setting. So yeah, again, I think that all the structures and systems have to be aligned. This is where the leadership has to be very attentive to, though, the reality and needs of the families that they serve, and discern the right way. Because I think that, to assume there's a one size fits all approach may not be the best way either. And spiritual fathers, local pastors, and their teams are best suited to discern how do we approach and engage families, and empower them through formation ultimately.
Well, I think we're so used to the American system, and I went to both Catholic and private or public school on and off. I think the majority of American parents are just used to engaging at a point at which there's trouble. Joey's failing math, so I have to get involved now. I have to go see the teacher, or so and so hit so and so on the bus, so now I have to go to school and engage. But there's kind of no pre-engagement, except for I think COVID sort of we looked behind the curtain and saw the wizard. A lot of parents did, because they were in the room as their child was on their device, and they were hearing some of the things they were being taught, and they're like, "Whoa, what's going on here? When did this happen? When did schools start teaching this nonsense? When did schools start, making children advocates, for certain political stances, and creating little advocates?" So I think, COVID really was a great awakening. And I think in a lot of ways, even like with the teacher unions, I think COVID was not a friend of theirs. That I think when they look back, when public teacher unions look back on this at some point, they're going to say, we made a huge mistake by actually closing in-person schools and fighting to keep schools closed, because parents got a really good look at what's going on. And it's flipped this whole dynamic of all these understandings of public education and what unions are and what they're about and who they're really advocating for, not children, but adults in the classroom. And so I think it's going to be very interesting. And I think we're not only in Catholic education I think they're going to be a renewal, Elias, and I know you're involved with me and others in this renewal effort. But I think there's going to be, at some point, there's going to be a tectonic shift in public education, because there has to be, because it's getting so bad that eventually people just are not going to, they're just not going to accept this anymore. But well, Kimberly, I see that we're kind of getting to the close of the hour here. This has been a fascinating conversation, Elias. I wish we could. We'd love to have you back, actually, when you get settled in Portland, because I think there's some bigger issues too about talking about Hispanics and accessing Catholic education. I would love to have your thoughts on, but that's another hour topic. So just want to thank you for today. So grateful that you joined us today. And you're a good friend to me, and was thrilled with this conversation. And we wish you very, very good luck in our prayers as you transition to the Archdiocese of Portland and move your family. And just grateful for you being here today. And as we usually do, Kimberly, if you would, Elias, why don't we'll give you 30 seconds for your final thoughts, and then we're going to ask Kimberly to close us in prayer.
Yeah, no, thanks, Shawn, and Kimberly and Shawn, to the two of you. Thank you for the invitation to this conversation, and also for your good work on behalf of the church and the mission of Catholic education. I think that final thought would be this: the educational apostolate that the church has, really flowing from our Lord's commission to go and make disciples of all nations, right? By teaching and baptizing. Is one that requires the entirety of the church to embrace and to take ownership of, and in support of, again, those successors of the apostles that are here. And so I know the two of you are doing also just incredible work on behalf of the renewal of our schools in these times. And I think people oftentimes hear that and they'll say, Elias, well, what are you saying? Are you saying that Catholic schools are failing, and that's that what we've done has been broken and wrong? And my response to that is merely to say, every age and every time, really, I think presents and poses challenges that are unique to that time. And I don't think I have to belabor for you all what those challenges are today. But we are in a moment akin to other moments in the history of humanity and in the church's own history, where perhaps the culture and the environment around us is hostile to a Catholic, a Christian worldview. And I do believe really deeply that the response that the Lord desires from the church, and particularly the educational apostle in the church, is to go on a rescue mission for souls, and to be a sanctuary of education, as Pius XI would describe, right? That brings into harmony the church, the family, and the school. And we need to continue to grow in this coalition of those that are committed mission partners, and committed to the renewal ultimately. So I want to thank you both for also your contributions to this work and this effort. And for many of us, whether in Denver or in another diocese as well, your work has been invaluable too. So thank you for all your efforts as well.
Well, God bless you, Elias. Best of luck in Portland, and we will certainly have you back on again to have that conversation. Let's close with a Hail Mary. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Thanks for being with us, Elias. Thank you, Shawn, and thank you to our listeners. Until next time.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly.